So I have started this show with a hoodie on, and I am hoping to goodness that I do not just burst out in flames. But we are going to persevere. We are going to talk about whether CGC should actually halt submissions of comics so as to allow them to catch up on the backlog. We'll talk about a few other things just ahead. Regie here, and I want to welcome you to Comics Today. This is a live show that we do on Wednesday to celebrate the best day of the week, that being New Comic Book Day. And just in a moment, I am going to go to the chat to see what it is that you all may have picked up at your LCS earlier today. So if you are in the live stream, make sure that you drop your list in there. And if you want to shout out your LCS, go ahead and do that as well. As I mentioned at the top, we are going to talk about whether CGC should actually halt submissions in so that they can catch up with the backlog. And I have a few guests on that are going to help me to make sense of this and a few other things. We'll see how the conversation goes. As a reminder, this show that you may be watching right now is actually going to be rebroadcast on the podcast. And the podcast is available on whatever your preferred platform might be. If you search for Regie Collects, you should be able to find me. And depending upon that platform, you can find as many as 100 old episodes. But if you're looking to take some Regie on the go, to do some workouts, to do some yard work, to drive to work, you can definitely find me on your podcast. So with that said, we're going to go here to the chat momentarily again to see what folks may have picked up. I did not pick up anything today because I did not make it to the LCS, but I see Terry here is clearly local to me. And as I look at the thumbnail, I recognize who Terry is. He's giving a shout out to Heroes Aren't Too Hard to Find, which is here in North Carolina, not too far from me. I did not make it to the LCS, but I do have some cool books that are sitting on the desk in front of me that I am going to show you here momentarily, some books that have shown up, and I think they are definitely cool. So haven't made it to the LCS, says Burke Family. How you doing, brother? It is good to see you. Got Deathstroke, number 5, Gunslinger Spawn, number 4, Vampirella, Unholy, number 2. I think that's from Dynamite. And then we also have X-Men issue number 7. Kimball, it is good to see you, brother, as always. Comic Lover Comics says TMNT. Nothing else. That is all that he plugged in. So we are going to acknowledge it. Milt, how you doing, brother? Milt has picked up. Oh no, Milt is saying the books of the week for him are Ice Cream Man, which I have never read. I might need to read that once in future, and also Thor. I've never read Ice Cream Man. I may have to look at that. Scrolling through some of the comments here. So again, we are going to discuss whether CGC should halt submissions. They have not done anything. It is a discussion. It is going to be a discussion that we are going to get into. What is it, Dave? Dave picked up Superman 78, issue number 6, Dark Knight of Steel, issue number 1. There you go. Good stuff right there. Scrolling through, a couple of people shouting out the OG. Tina, the OG over here. Juggernaut says no LCS for him today, but hopefully all of the soldiers were able to pick up their books today. Raul says he couldn't make it to the LCS. Brandon says 20 X Factor keys or so. That's what's up. That's a nice haul, my friend. That is a nice haul. Scrolling through, what is that? 2021 New Age Investments is saying, did anyone notice that CGC is now working with eBay to verify sports cards? Yes. My buddy Neo Rob noticed it right away. I do believe he's even done a video on his channel, Neo Cards and Comics, here on the YouTube machine that you can check out, where he actually talks about that. And what I can tell you is, if you remember New Age, they were doing something similar to that for comics, something similar for comics a couple of years ago, whereby which if you wanted to buy a comic off of eBay, you could have a CGC person for a small fee evaluate the comic that you were thinking about buying and give a dirty grade for that comic to make sure that it was a smart purchase. So this is not necessarily something new, if you will, that being the relationship between CGC and eBay, but it is definitely a step in the evolution of that relationship. And again, my buddy Neo has a video out there that you guys can check out with a lot of details in there. So Steve says only 13 books and one variant of Thor 21, 2 Moon Knight #9, Gunslinger Spawn #4, and Dark Blood #6, and so much more. Scrolling through the rest of the comments here, seeing what else you guys may have picked up. What is that? Turbo Man. Ooh. Oh, stand up, Gibbon gang. Stand up. Turbo Man has picked up ASM 110. He says it has arrived. It arrived yesterday. That's what's up. I'm definitely going to encourage people to not spam the stream with repeated comments. I'm going to just throw that out there. Blue wrenches. Blue wrenches. Scrolling through some of the comments here, seeing what else you guys may have picked up. Will, you know what's up. He says ASM 110, the first appearance of the Gibbon, hence the name, the Gibbon Gang. Is a classic. Yes, indeed, it is. Scrolling down, Kevin, how you doing, brother? Picked up Batman and Thor. Shout out to Liberty Comics, his LCS. That's what's up. All right, let me show you guys what I picked up. Let me show you this right here. We went ahead and sent this in to be graded. That is a horrible glare on that. This is Submariner issue #1. It came back at a 5.5 with off-white pages. I've actually had this book in the collection for a couple of years now. Finally got around to sending it in, and I do believe that the grade is appropriate. I believe that the grade is definitely fair for that book. Nice to have it graded. I think I have 1 or 2 more copies of it that are still raw over in the bins over there. The other book that I sent in is this one right here. X-Men #6. This is a wonderful book. Of course, Submariner right there, flying and doing his thing, facing off against the X-Men. One of my favorite low number X-Men books right there. That one came back at a 7.0 with off-white pages. So definitely a really cool book. So he's that other Aqua guy. That's what's up. Action figure is like bad glare, but great book. That's what's up, man. That's what's up. But yeah, those are 2 books that I finally sent in to have graded. They came back, and definitely pleased with where they ended. I would definitely prefer to have the X-Men be the 7.0 versus the other way around. So I'm actually quite comfortable with that. Don't know quite yet whether I'm going to keep the Submariner or move it on and buy a higher grade. I don't quite know which way the wind's going to blow on that one just yet, but definitely cool to have them back and in my possession. Milt is like, good book. There you go. Juggernaut. Holy guacamole. Cool book. That's what's up. Kevin says he's still looking for ASM 110, brother. They are out there. They are out there, my friend, but please do not overpay. Please do not pay an arm and 2 Gibbon legs for ASM 110. It is a cool book, but please do what you think is right with that one. Thank you, Squirrel Man. It's definitely appreciated. So was there one other thing? Oh, there was one other thing I was going to hip you guys to. So there is something amazingly dope that is going to be coming. And why are there so many windows open? I do not know why that's the case. Something amazingly dope drops soon. Stay tuned. And it's not what you think. So I used this graphic previously as I led into the release of the Guide to Smart Comic Collecting. I am incredibly lazy and sometimes a little cheap, so we did not refresh the graphic and come up with something new and something original. But I do have something that is amazingly dope dropping soon, so I definitely encourage you guys to stay tuned. If you are not subscribed to the channel and all that kind of stuff, you definitely want to do that because I think that it's going to be really cool. At least fingers crossed that it will be, and I hope to drop it and announce it in the early part of February. So scrolling through, I'm actually looking, still waiting on my order that was received in August. People are waiting longer. Tina, I gotta have fun. So I talked to Tina the other day, and I said something to the effect that I had a few surprises that were going to be coming out, and she made a comment where it was like, I would be surprised if you didn't have more surprises. You know what I'm saying? Because I'm always working on something. And I think this project that I'm going to be releasing is one that has actually been in my head probably for about 9 or 10 months. And so I'm very excited to actually get it out there to see, whether this is something that is going to resonate with people. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. So With that, we are actually going to make a little bit of a pivot, and we are going to talk about the topic that is the thumbnail for this video. And it is a discussion around whether CGC should actually halt submissions potentially of modern comics. There have been a lot of different ideas that I've seen thrown out there. We did a video recently, a live stream, where I talked to Doug about one other idea that people have been throwing out, which is this idea that potentially CGC should open up a new facility, and that by opening a new facility, you know, whether it be in the US, on the West Coast, near Canada, in the UK, the idea that people had was that this potentially was going to be the solve for all that ails CGC. And I think we had a wonderful conversation that kind of highlighted that potentially that is not the right way to go, right? That potentially is not the right way to go. And immediately after that live stream, there was a robust conversation that was had on the Discord that I think still is going on right now. Like, people are still discussing since the last show on Sunday, what is going on with CGC. And so if you are not part of Discord, I encourage you to head over, check it out. It is free to join, robust conversation, a lot of wonderful people over there having a good time. But we want to continue building upon that discussion that we started by talking about another idea, again, that has come out, and it's this notion that CGC should halt submissions. And I've seen a lot of different ideas. One of the ones that seems to be pretty popular is that we should halt submissions, or that they should halt submissions of modern comics. And so I have a guest on tonight that is going to maybe help me to make sense of this. And while he isn't necessarily, you know, squarely in the sphere of comics, he does have some experience with grading companies halting submissions. And I think that potentially the insight that he can offer us with what has happened with PSA might actually be somewhat applicable to us with comics. And I think we as comic book collectors sometimes put the blinders on, and we don't necessarily look at other verticals, and we don't always look at what's happening in the rest of the world. And so we're going to maybe explore a little bit of that tonight. And so to that point, I want to welcome to the show my buddy Neo. Rob, it is good to see you, brother.
What is up, Reggie? Whoop.
So did I misstate anything about you having a video out there that talks about the whole CGC eBay relationship?
I do have a video about that came out late yesterday afternoon.
So hopefully people will check that out. 2021 New Age Investments, good guy. I know him from California. He raised that issue, and I wanted to make sure that I was correct in guiding people over to your channel. And we'll try to give you, you know, well, why don't you just shout out the channel right now so people can bookmark it or whatever they want to do.
Yeah, Neo Cards and Comics, pretty simple to find. Same on YouTube, IG, Twitter, the whole 9 yards. And that's the last video that I put up, was about the whole eBay, CCG, CGC, CSG, whatever, the whole Blackstone army.
The alphabet soup, brother.
Yeah. So it has definitely sent some ripples through. There's a lot of interesting takes one way or the other, and some concerns on backlog, both from that perspective and also to what you're talking about. The point is, you know, the CCG entity is having problems keeping up on orders on the CSG side with sports cards, and obviously the comic book side. And now they seem to be taking on this other project that isn't necessarily grading, but I have to imagine takes a lot of manpower. eBay sells a lot of sports cards.
Yep. And it's going to suck down some man hours, some FTEs. It has to suck up some of that. So, but getting back to the task at hand here, Rob, do you think, again, you're not the biggest submitter to CGC. You buy most of your books already graded, and they tend to be, I think, pretty decent sized keys. But with that context set, do you think that it would be a good idea for CGC to halt submissions in for graded comics?
I don't think they should fully shut down, but I do think it would be a good idea to limit the lower tier submissions, or halt the lower tier submissions. We are not fully on the other side of the PSA shutdown, so we haven't seen exactly like what the other side looks like, but we are creeping closer. They've been opening up and lowering prices in different submission tiers over the last 2 months, and it's been almost a year. I actually went back and looked at some notes. They officially shut down April 1st of 2021, except for the 2 highest tiers of submissions is when PSA actually shut down. And that was previewed by on March 1st, they put a massive price increase in, which did not slow things down, which actually created a bigger backlog because word got out about the price increase and they got slammed. And then 30 days later, which is also an interesting parallel to CGC, it was right after a new investment group took over. Right after the new investment group, I think, took control either March 1st or April 1st. And one of the first things they did was say, no more.
So there was a lot in that response, and I want to try to break some of that stuff out just a little bit. What I heard you say there initially was that it may be best for CGC not to halt all submissions, but to halt the lower tier. In your mind, when you say lower tier, are you also thinking, in terms of value, or are you thinking in terms of like modern comics in terms of that lower tier comment?
So sports card grading works a little bit different than comic book grading. It's not necessarily broken out by era. It's more so based off of, for PSA anyway, the value of what the card or comic would be in this case, or card in this case would be. Once it's in a PSA slab, you have to give your best guess on what you think it would grade. And there's a declared value that you have to state, and that determines what category you're going to submit at, and then also turnaround time. The lower turnaround times are lower declared values and longer turnaround times. So they cut out everything except for what they classify as express and super express, which was at the time $300 per card and $200 per card with some pretty high declared value. You're talking about some pretty big ticket items for that. So in the CGC case, which as you stated, I'm not super familiar with submitting to them because I buy mostly graded, but I believe you'd be looking at like your modern tier, which I think is kind of like your entry level point, and then maybe 1 or 2 tiers up from that. You'd essentially just be submitting your big boy books.
Because I think, and I'm trying to do it off of memory. I want to say that the upper range for those lower tiers, if you will, is like $400 or something like that. So you're basically talking about $400 and above might be where the line is. And I've heard people throw out that type of scenario before, and I don't know if they've landed on that because of what has happened with PSA, right? To do it at a value. Because one of the challenges that I face to some degree is the idea of cutting out all modern comics. And the reason for that is that when you say modern comics, not you, but when people say modern comics, they're basically talking about 37 years, right? They're talking about comics from 1985 all the way to like today being New Comic Book Day. So by doing it with an age, it doesn't necessarily work because our ages of comics are a little bit jacked up. But what I'm hearing you say and what I've heard others say is that it may be better to do it based upon volume, thinking that it is those less expensive comics that potentially is what's clogging up the output. Would that be a fair statement to make for you? Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Okay. And so to your earlier point, PSA followed to some degree or another. I'm sorry, let me restate. It appears that CGC could be following a PSA blueprint, right? There has been an investor. That investor has come in. The prices have gone up twice now. It hasn't halted submissions. But to that point, when you look at PSA, how well has it worked for them to do what they've done, which is to eliminate those lower tiers, take a couple of price increases? How well has that worked?
So once again, we don't 100% know yet because they're still not fully back open, but they are getting close. And it seems to be, from an outside looking in, pretty well. I mean, I'm sure there's been some ramifications that we don't know about. But with them starting to open up lower tiers now, and like I said, it took about a year, you could start to see the blueprint of when they come back. I always, the joke that I always make is there'll be a fully operational Death Star at that point. You know, and if they want to, they can grade so many cards because they've had this time to ramp up, get new processes in place, kind of like reset everything. When they fully open back up again, they could potentially be set up. They were already the dominant player, but they could dominate even more because I think they would have the capabilities to just outprice everybody. You know, if you have the ability to grade hundreds of thousands of cards in a month, you need to fill those slots. You don't put all that work in to get to that point to then say, oh, cool, we're fully reopened, but we're still at $50 a card and you're not getting that many cards in the door. You're going to price to fill up, I would think anyway, to want to fill those slots. So they could potentially undercut a lot of their competition. I mean, like I said, they already command the highest secondary resale value on the market. So they're in a good spot already. So, we'll see where it goes from here, but it seems like they have used their time wisely.
Yeah.
And there was, which I'll let you respond, and there was some interesting fallout from their competitors as well from them shutting down.
So, I mean, what I heard you say there was that we don't know the full ramifications of what they've done. It is to be determined, but it seems like it's gone pretty well. But you're also talking about a year in which they've been trying to play catch up, which is a long time. I mean, that is a heck of a long time to shut off the lower tiers. And in all honesty, I don't know if the comic book market will benefit from that. Just being completely honest. And please correct me if I'm wrong. Hasn't there been a downturn in the card market? And is it possible that downturn, given that they do command such a high price in the secondary market, could that have contributed to that downturn that we're seeing right now, or that has been seen over the last year with trading cards? Is there something to that?
I think could be a small percentage attributed to that. I don't know that it's all of it, because I mean, the comic book market's basically followed in the footsteps. About 3 months after the sports card market peaked, the comic book market peaked. Yep. And a lot of that stuff, while it hasn't retraced back to 2020 pricing, you've seen 30-40% drops in some even really big key books have had some pretty major pullbacks over the last 6 months. Where I did think it kind of hurt the sports card market a little bit is, for a lot of people, raw to grade was kind of how they built their bankroll. I'll go to a card show, I'll open some packs, I get a $5 card, I submit it to PSA for 20 or $25. It comes back a PSA 10. I sell it for 150. They then take that 150, re-inject it back into the marketplace, rinse and repeat the same thing over and over and over again.
Yep.
So I do think that had some impact on the sports card market. I think there was larger forces at play that caused the downturn more so than that, but I think it definitely had at least some impact on it.
And again, I personally believe that there are a lot of similarities between what happens on the sports card side and what happens on the comic side. And it might partly be because there are people that bounce back and forth between those two, but you're also talking about, on our side, people that do the exact same thing. The comic comes out that today, for example, they immediately send it off to CGC. As soon as it comes back, it's a couple of bucks extra. They sell it, they take that money, they buy something else with it, and they just keep that process going. In fact, there were, I don't know if there still are, there were entire businesses at one point in time where you could pre-order items that were coming out. They would secure them at a local comic shop, send them in to be graded, and then come back at a 9.8 for you. Like, that was their whole business model. And I don't know whether those businesses have imploded, but there is definitely a lot of resources being generated through CGC and the value add that comes from it. And again, we see a lot of that on your side as well. But please correct me if I'm wrong. And I may be wrong because I don't know a ton about cards, but when PSA started to open back things up again, did they take another price increase, or had they already taken their price increase?
You're saying after they shut down?
After they shut down and started to open back up, did they take another price increase after that?
No.
Okay.
Essentially what they did was they shut down, they went to 300, 200. I don't remember the exact timing. After a few months, it stayed at 300 and they dropped 200 to 150. And then right around Thanksgiving, so that would have been almost 8 months later, they introduced a $100 level. The $100 level, there's like not a lot of stuff that makes sense at that level. It's a very niche level to open back up again. They did not see a lot of submissions, I don't think, at that level, because they were turning that stuff around fairly quickly. And this is all fairly recent. The thing that they have done now is, if you're a PSA member, kind of like a CGC member, you're not required to be a PSA member to submit. But if you are a PSA member, you get some perks. And one of them is this they're doing now. They've just reintroduced a $50 level. And at that $50 level, it's not wide open. They're holding lottery events, essentially. You enter a queue, you enter a waiting room. and then for an hour, and then after and it's just click the link, and it just, you just keep a browser tab open. At the end of that time, and you can enter any time during that hour, but once the clock strikes noon, say, anyone in the waiting room gets shuffled up, put in a random order, and then they know how many slots they're going to take, and you're allowed to submit 5 cards per slot. So you get 1 slot, you're allowed to submit 5 cards, and those stay in your queue. You don't have to use them right away. I think they'll stay in there for like a month or so. I don't remember, but that's what they've just rolled that out within the last week or two. That's a brand new thing that they've done.
And I'm gonna be honest with you, that sounds very convoluted. Like, you explained it to me the other day in like DMs, and I was like, that makes my face hurt. Like, I get it, but it's like, it's just not clean. It is a little convoluted. So real quick, for those folks that are coming in right now, I am talking with Rob, aka Neo, and we are having a conversation as to whether CGC should halt submissions of some sort. This is not something that CGC is doing, but this is something that the comic book community has been talking about. And I wanted to spend some time discussing the possibility, right? Because with any decision, there is some good and there is some bad. And we have a person here, that being Rob, that has gone through this with PSA on the trading card side. And I think that there are some lessons that we can learn from his experience that may be applicable to what we may encounter on the comic side. So that's part of why we're having this conversation right now. So again, to your earlier point, they shut down for a little over a year, PSA did, in order to catch up with this backlog. They have somewhat caught up with that backlog, and they are slowly opening things back up. But to your point, they have a robust infrastructure. They have a lot of FTEs, a lot of cheeks and seats that need some work to do to cover that overhead. Because I can imagine what their overhead looks like, and what PSA has essentially come up with is almost like the ticket thing at the deli. You take a ticket, you wait for your turn, you wait for your name to be called, you go up and you place your order. How has the trading card community responded to them taking that approach to basically generate revenue? How have they responded to that?
It's a very mixed bag. Some people are like understanding of, because essentially how PSA has divvied up their workload is 80% of their workforce is focused on the backlog. So they are still churning orders that have been sitting since January, February, March of 2021. 20% of their workforce is focused on anything new coming in at those higher tier levels and these new levels that they're opening up. So there is some frustration about like, hey, I've had stuff sitting there since February. Why are you guys taking new cards in the door? Which I can understand. Some people are like, hey, they're a business. They still want to maintain at least some footprint in the current market. I get that they're taking orders in. I understand how they've divvied up the workforce or whatever. Most people are pretty receptive to the lottery system. It sounds like a lot on paper, but it's literally just click a link and leave a browser tab open, and then it pops up and tells you if you got in or not, essentially. But explaining it does make it sound way more confusing than what it actually is. But it's a mixed bag, just like most things on the internet. But there is some frustration about the people that still have cards there. But the thing to remember is a lot of the people that still have cards there were paying $10 to $20 to $30 a piece to grade them in some cases. Whereas now you couldn't get that grading fee to save your life. And another frustration is, as you pointed out earlier, the sports card market has dropped a lot. There are a lot of people getting burned on the fact that it cost $30 to grade this card that was worth $150 back then, and now maybe it's worth $20. Yep. And they're instantly upside down on it the second that the card shows up.
Like, I literally just did a video on that very thing because, and it's not CGC's fault, right? I mean, it was a cool title to call the video to get people to watch, but it's not CGC's fault. It just is what it is. But $600, I am not going to realize $600 worth of profit, because when I sent the book in, I was anticipating something happening. Those things kind of happened. And before I could get the book back, there was a $600 decline in the value of the book. And now it's sitting over there just waiting for the right opportunity. One of the questions that I have for you is, you spoke a little bit about the churn, like people getting a card, going to a show, opening up a pack, getting a $5 card, sending it in, getting a PSA 10, taking that card, selling it, making a decent profit, right? How much do you think PSA's backlog is attributed, and even their current submissions, is attributed to that type of churn versus new card collectors coming into the hobby? Like how much of it is new churn or new stuff versus just old stuff just spinning around?
I think the flipping mentality is still what driving most of their submissions. PSA does have a big history with set registries. So you have people that literally registering the set, and it almost like ranks you like an achievement leaderboard, like a video game almost, on their webpage of like who has the best 86 Fleer set in existence, like the most PSA 10s or whatever. Think of it from the comic book side. Imagine you wanted to do a CGC run of Wolverine 1 through 100. And that could be a thing that you could do. And it would literally show every CGC user what their Wolverine 1 to 100 CGC run looks like, who has the most 9.8s, who has the most signature series, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
They have a long history. That was one of the things that kind of started setting them apart. But part of that was very cheap grading. Back in the day, you could grade with them for $8 or $10. And when I say back in the day, a couple of years ago, because a lot of the cards that people were sending in for that were worth basically not even the price to grade, but people wanted them for the set registry.
Right.
So that has faded a little bit over time as the new age has come in with I'm just churning and burning and making money, and then probably reinvesting that money in the cards that I actually want, or to build the bankroll to work into bigger things, more expensive things.
Yep. CGC does have something similar to that.
Okay.
I don't participate in it, but I do believe that is the registry. I think it's called the registry that's out there. I've glanced at it and I've just walked away because there's just certain things I'm just not interested in doing. So one of the other questions I have for you before I let you go, Rob, is realistically, do you think that this problem is going to get better? Like realistically, when you take a step back at it, and look at what is happening, is it actually going to get better, or is it just going to kind of shift one way and then shift the other, right? They're going to catch up and then they're going to get backlog again, right? So let me pause there and see what your thoughts are on whether things will ever truly change.
I think from any grading company's perspective, you always want a little bit of a backlog. How much that is, I don't know, but you always want a little bit there because that's your cushion. That's work to be done to put people in the seats, to give them something to do. So you kind of always want a little bit of a cushion there. I think PSA, with the new ownership, at least on paper and what they say, appears that they want to do things correctly. And that's why they're doing these events. And I could see them doing that going forward in regards to, even when they fully open back up again, what does fully open back up again mean? They've said that it could be, hey, you might have a month where you could freely submit as many cards as you want at a $25 level. And then we might get to the point where we say, you know what? You can't submit at $25 a month right now. It's going to be another lottery event for the next 30 days. Yep. Because essentially they're going to have systems of checks and balances. If they need to pull a lever to say, slow down a little bit. Yep. We got a backlog, but we don't want it too big of a backlog. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It seems to be the way that they're heading.
And I can tell you that too is another idea that people have thrown out for comics. They're like, maybe you halt submissions periodically. Maybe you eliminate certain tiers or certain ages of books in order to allow them to kind of play catch up. I think there's a lot of different ideas that have been thrown out there. And as I mentioned before, any idea is going to have some benefits, but it's also going to have some negatives as well. And I'm going to be honest, like a lottery or gating submissions, it seems confusing, but at the same time, we are in a situation for better or worse, where a lot of people are choosing to send things in to be graded. And it's just, it is what it is. Like, I don't know that they want to ramp up to accommodate the peak of submissions, because maybe those submissions will go away. I don't know. Right. And that's something that maybe we're going to talk about here a little bit later in the show. But Rob, I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your experience with us with regard to how PSA has actually handled this. Again, because I think that there are a lot of parallels between what happens on the trading card side and what is also happening on the comic side. So I want to thank you for that. Before I let you go, give a shout out for your channel, for where people can actually find you, because I think you have some great content over there that people should be aware of.
Once again, Neo Cards and Comics. It's mostly sports card content with a mix of comic books and Marvel trading cards as well, kind of thrown in the mix there as well, because those have been hot lately. But that's mostly what the content is, mostly card related with, comic book video here mixed in every once in a while.
I think you picked up, what was it, was it 2 Spider-Man trading cards that I saw earlier today on Instagram?
Yeah, I got, these are the ones that are the super hot. They're PMGs. They're numbered out of 99, precious metal gems.
That's nice.
These a Spider-Man, the first year PMG Spider-Man just went for 140,000 at Golden Auctions.
I thought you were about to say
BGS 9, I think.
I thought you were gonna say dollars. You went to
a blue out of 50, I think, just did 140,000.
I wasn't expecting that number. I need to come into some Marvel trading cards here because I could use some of that money,
Yeah.
Rob, it is always a pleasure to talk with you, brother. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate you.
Not a problem. Anytime, Reggie. We'll catch you guys later.
Thank you. All right, cool. Did not cut him off that time. We are actually going to continue this conversation in just a moment. And part of what I was alluding to earlier, right as I was getting into the conversation with Rob there, was that I think that we as comic book collectors tend to maybe put blinders on and not necessarily pay attention to what is actually happening in other verticals like trading cards. And graded trading cards, for better or worse, are very similar to what we do, right? And I think we also tend to sometimes ignore other things that are happening in the world when there potentially are some wonderful lessons that can be learned. And some of the questions that I asked Rob were leading me to the next point that I'm going to make here. I am curious. I'm actually looking at the chat right now. I'm curious how many of you all have purchased Peloton bikes. Is there anybody in this chat that has purchased a Peloton bike, or maybe even heard of Peloton? I am curious about this one, and so I'm waiting for the thing to click over. You guys are talking about a few other things here, so I'm gonna give it a second. Give a shout out real quick to who was that dropped the super chat? Scrolling up, Michael Baker dropped a super chat here. He says, we need a grading machine like a copier modified with a computer to scan and grade comic books, replace the subjectiveness and slowness of human graders. Michael, I will tell you, if you head over to the Discord, brother, there is a full conversation where we spend some time talking about using technology and artificial intelligence to actually aid in the grading of comics. It is not a bad idea. There was, again, a great conversation on the Discord, and I can tell you that my buddy Doug Braden brought that very idea up maybe 10 months ago. He brought that up maybe 10 months ago. So let me see. Tina saying, nice chat with Neo. It's always a pleasure to talk with that guy. It really is. Let me see. Scrolling through, my Uncle Ron did. No Peloton for me, too much money. Let me see. Love my Peloton bike, says Mr. Martin there. Yep, got one, says Ryan. Rob says, I use the Peloton app on a regular bike. That is cheating, sir. Rob says he's been trading some of that Peloton. No, right there. All right. So a couple of people have heard of it. A couple of people own it, blah, blah, blah. Good stuff. All right. So the reason that I bring up Peloton is because they are in the news right now. And so I'm going to bring my next guest up here in a hot moment, but I do want to take a look at this article that appeared on, I believe it's Vox.com. Peloton's big whoops. The pandemic was the best thing that happened to Peloton until it was the worst. And so I want to read part of this. It says, Peloton is in a pickle. I mean, that's good writing. Peloton is in a pickle. In 2020, the at-home digital exercise company could not get its products out the door fast enough. It surpassed 1 billion in quarterly sales. That is a redunculous amount of money. During the past 3 months of the year, and leadership fretted its profits could take a hit as it invested to keep pace with pandemic-inducing Pelopalooza. People waited weeks and months for their bikes and treadmills to be delivered. Alongside companies such as Zoom and Clorox, Peloton's stock was a solid stay-at-home bet on Wall Street, but nothing lasts forever. Fast forward to 2020, then Peloton finds itself in a quite different spot. The good news is that it is caught up on the supply side and finally has bikes and treadmills readily available. The bad news is the demand it was trying to catch up with is no longer there. They have misjudged the pandemic. They bought into the hype. They bought into all the demand. They manufactured way too many products. And what has happened? No one is actually interested in their equipment right now. There's the next part here I want to read to you. It's been a rough several months for Peloton. Concerns about the safety of their treadmills caused a recall last time. Let me skip through some of this stuff. Let me see. There was a part in here. One of the challenges, and I may have highlighted the wrong section here. One of the challenges was that they were believing in the demand, right? They were believing that the orders that they were receiving was an expansion of their audience base. And what the data would suggest is that all that was happening is that they were pulling forward orders. And what I mean by that is in 2020, they started to produce a lot of stuff that was filling a need for people that were going to buy a Peloton bike in 2021 and 2022, but they bought it in 2020. And so Peloton has created all this inventory, and the customers already have their bikes because they got them in 2020. They placed their orders in 2020. So now in 2021, 2022, there's no more customers because they haven't increased their customer base. And I bring this up because potentially there are some parallels here with what is actually happening with some of these grading companies. If they grow too big and they build out all of these facilities, they hire all of these people, potentially there will not be as much demand. Maybe when the world opens up, maybe things, the economy takes a nosedive. I don't know, but they're definitely playing a game here with, to Rob's point, how much backlog they have, because that's their cushion, that's their FTE work, et cetera, et cetera. So I actually want to pause here real quick, and I want to bring in my next guest. You guys know him. You see him on here all the time. Doug, it's good to see you, brother.
Hey, Regie, great to see you.
So you were behind the scenes. You heard, I do believe, part of the conversation with Rob. You were able to read this article on Peloton. What are your maybe thoughts and takeaways regarding what you read in this article?
So I feel like there are some similarities, but some differences between Peloton and CGC. And I think one of the things that is in CGC's benefit is that I feel it tracks more to the subscription side of things with Peloton than the actual production of equipment. Mm-hmm. And what I mean by that is you can submit books anytime at a specific price. You don't have to make that one large purchase investment up front. So I think that while there are absolutely lessons to be learned, and you don't want to sink so much money into revving up a business that demand might adjust, I feel like Peloton, which has still, at least in the article, done pretty well with its subscribers, where they got hammered was that large equipment manufacturing side of things. So some similarities, some differences. Ultimately, I feel like the demand for graded comics is so much driven right now by movie streaming services and the value difference, especially in modern books, of high grade graded comics versus raw. So as long as that still exists, there is the perception that I, as a collector or an investor or speculator, can make money off of it, which is gonna continue to drive interest.
But to that point of what I just heard you say there towards the end,
Regie, are you there?
Your camera froze up there. You may not be able to hear me. So I'm going to continue talking, and fingers crossed that it'll clear itself up. But one of the points that you made towards the end of your comment there was around the fact of the raw versus grade gap, right? That price increase that as you get and you realize as you get a raw book graded, to the point that people have been making, to the point of my conversation with Neo, if you were to halt the modern tier, if you were to halt lower tiers, you would essentially be taking a healthy chunk of that revenue away from CGC, and also taking a healthy chunk out of the churn that we were just talking about. And the question becomes, does that start to ruin some of the fundamentals of what is actually happening in the world of graded comics?
So I'm glad you asked me that, because I feel like there is a huge unintended consequence for comics by doing that did not exist with cards. And
Tell me more.
that is signature series and
Mm.
how that impacts artists. Most modern comic artists supplement their income through signings at cons, and many writers do. So if you stopped modern tier grading, that would take away a huge income stream. Now, let's flip it and say you said, okay, we're not going to allow any modern grading except for signature series. Well, there's a consequence there too, because that might ramp up demand so much that now I can raise my prices as an artist, because the only way you can get that Something is Killing the Children #1 signed is if I sign it, so I can jack up my prices. That might be good for me as an artist, but that might not be good for the comic vendors at the same con, because now if you've got to pay me double, triple what you would have for a signature, you're going to spend money less elsewhere. So there are unintended consequences and trickle down effects that I think are problematic with cutting off certain tiers in comic grading.
One of the other things that I just that occurred to me as you were talking there was that if they do cut out the lower tiers, prevent people from sending in brand new comics of less than a certain dollar amount, I think that that would also hit the creators and also the publishers. And here's what I mean by this. Think about how many speculators are out there buying 5, 10 copies of Something is Killing the Children, or whatever the hot book is, sending that book in to be graded so that they can make a profit. If they're not buying those multiple copies, then that means that the artists, the creators, are not getting paid for those copies that are being printed. That also means that the publishers are not making money because of the demand from, one person buying 10 copies multiplied by how many people, right? There are unintended consequences to every single thing. And that's part of why we're doing what we're doing right now, is that people are trying to solve the problem without fully thinking through the ramifications of the solve that they're trying to put in place. I see you nodding a lot, but I had to get that out. Let me pause to hear what your thoughts are.
I just totally agree. For as bright as we are, and as much as we talk about this, we cannot solve every one of these problems.
Agreed.
If we could, chances are they would have found us and paid us money to do it, and there wouldn't be a problem.
But it also speaks to the fact that, I don't know that these companies, and just I'm gonna just leave it at that. I don't know that these companies are just sitting on their hands looking at the problem like, hey, it is what it is, right? I think that it's always more complicated than what we perceive it to be. And again, that's part of the reason why we are challenging some of these things that people are throwing out as possible solutions to help explore why maybe that's not a perfect fit. Like, I had a guy in the comment section the other day say that they should put a fully functioning CGC facility in the UK. And I'm like, so first of all, the dollar to euro, I don't think is that great. Second, you might need to get in line behind Canada, because I assume that Canada has more demand of comics than the UK. But it's like we're all looking at it through our own lens, and we're trying to solve without fully appreciating everything that is existing around us. And so again, it's part of why we're having this conversation. But let me ask you this, Doug, as we get ready to wrap up here, like, honestly, I'll ask you the same question I asked Rob. Like, what's the solve? Like, is there really a solve to this? Because every single thing we come up with has it's a double-edged sword. So I'll pause to hear what your thoughts are.
I think there are lots of little things that could be done. We've talked in the past about using AI and technology on the exterior books and having human graders look at the interior. That might speed things up. The reality is any fix is going to increase the cost for the consumer. And the reality is right now, people don't like that it's taking a long time and they're having to pay more money. So
I get it.
If you can genuinely find a way to cut the time down, I think people will, swallow that bitter pill a little easier if the prices go up. Hey, the prices went up, but instead of waiting 7 months, I'm waiting, 3 months. Okay, I can deal with that. Anything else like little things? Mark Andrews, who's in the chat, and I were DMing earlier today, and we were talking about things they could do, like cutting off certain levels at an automatic pre-screen. So, for instance, if you sent in a book and of any age and it came in below like a 3.0, you just got it kind of bagged and sealed with a under 3.0, to speed up and reduce encapsulation. But for someone who's sending in a big expensive book where a 2.5 might command a lot more than a 1.8, that's going to create a problem. So again, no easy solutions other than be willing to pay more money or be willing to wait longer, or watch this all adjust if there is a Peloton-like reduction in submissions, which I don't think any of us wants to see that happen.
Right. It's going to be very interesting to see how all this plays out, and again, as a content creator, one of the great things is that it provides an endless source of discussion and debate, right? Because there are no easy answers. My hope is that all of these companies out there continue to explore these different options. I think one thing that we've come back to again and again and again is, to your last point there, the introduction of technology could potentially assist in some of this stuff. It is not the solve, but potentially could assist. And I think that there was some healthy conversation that was had in the Discord server about the use of artificial intelligence. I would encourage people to head over and check that out. It occurred in the general chat within the Discord server. So folks definitely want to check that out. A couple of people over there smashing some stuff. What is that? Peloton stock went from $20 to almost $200, back to under $20 per share. And I will tell you, Robert, one of the downsides to them missing the mark and doing what they did is that there are discussions around store closures and also layoffs as well. And so that is one of the unintended consequences of them doing what they did, is that people are going to lose their job, which is never a good thing. So it is roughly tough, definitely tough out there. So I'm trying to read and speak at the same time. Doug, before I let you go, where can people find you online so they can get a hold of you?
Best place to get me is on Instagram at doug.bratton, BRATTON.9.
So am I going to be hooking up with you in May for this con?
It's looking pretty good. I think it might happen.
Fingers crossed. We'll see. Doug, I'll talk to you probably in like 15, 20 minutes on Instagram.
Almost definitely. Bye.
Love that guy. All right. So again, I wanted to just have this conversation from a few different vantage points, a few different things I wanted to interject in here. Again, I don't have the answers. I really don't. But what I will do is to give you a couple of things to think about. And I will challenge some things that I consistently hear and see, because none of these solutions are perfect. I definitely want to thank you guys for hanging out with me just a little bit. Hold on. I saw this one out of the corner of my eye. Here's the solution. Regie and Doug should start their own grading company. I'm going to be honest with you, comic noob. I'm going to be honest with you, brother. I seriously gave it some consideration. But I'll be honest, brother. I prefer my position as a content creator, man. Being a grading company, that just does not seem to be the way to go if you want people to like you. I'm gonna just be honest. Like I debated it for a while, and I'm just like, that just seems like it's just gonna go really bad really quickly. I could see my live streams being awful with people that are mad at me or mad at a grader or mad at turnaround time. No, thank you. No, thank you. I'm going to steer clear of that. But again, I want to thank both of my guests for coming on the show. I absolutely appreciated chatting with both of them. I hope that you guys enjoyed the conversation. And as I mentioned, I'm going to head over to Discord here, hang out for a little bit. So if you guys want to be part of the conversation, I definitely want to encourage you to join me there. And as a reminder, this show, which you just watched, if you're in the live stream, will be rebroadcast on the podcast. Take some Regie on the go by searching for Regie Collects on your preferred podcasting platform. As always, if you guys need to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.